Cyprus, a country in which a border has been created to separate its people. A country which has been divided for over 10 years. A country in which 1 in 3 of the population cannot return to their own homes, and 1 in 300 are missing or presumed dead. 2 communities of Greek and Turkish Cypriots have been forced to migrate to opposite ends of their own country. In 1974, the government was overthrown by a coup ordered by the military junta in Greece. 5 days later, the Turkish army landed in Cyprus, eventually marching south to occupy a third of the island. The United States government, who gave military aid and advice to both these countries, did nothing. And Britain, who had governed Cyprus for many years and had a legal responsibility to defend its independence, sat and watched from 99 square miles of military bases. Foreign interests created a tragedy and then blamed the victims, the Cypriots. When the British left in 1960, Sir Hugh Foote, now Lord Caradon, was the last colonial governor.
The great benefit of being in the island in the Second World War, when relations were perfectly friendly in 100 villages and every town. There was a Turkish area, a Greek area, and they lived together, and they'd done so for 100 years. No, it's not a natural thing. It's been created by politics and by international rivalry. Therefore, I'm not absolutely hopeless that there can be an answer, a peaceful answer.
The problem of the refugees is more important and must be solved more quickly than any of the other...
Christopher Price, a British MP in 1974, visited the refugee camps caused by the division of the country.
I'd always believed this myth that it was something to do with Greeks not being able to get on with Turks. And I very rapidly discovered it was absolutely nothing to do with that at all. It was to do with the Americans having decided to partition the island many years previously because they were terrified that it was if left as a vacuum, it would be filled by the Russians. So my perception of the problem totally changed very quickly.
Cyprus is in the Mediterranean. It lies at the crossroads of Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. A radar tracking station on Mount Olympus can gather Soviet military intelligence. Aircraft are within reach of the politically sensitive countries of the region. After the division of their country and the loss of their homes, many Cypriots found themselves under canvas in refugee camps. Many of them eventually came to Britain. Today, 1/6 of all Cypriots live in Britain. Their memories tell a story of the harmony which existed between Greek and Turkish Cypriot being destroyed in order to divide them and their country. The Sophocleus brothers from Anelyondas now work in Covent Garden Market. They remember Cyprus in the 1920s.
Well, in my village there was 32, 33 my family. Were about 12 Turkish families, and the rest was Greek families. And we are living together. Next to our neighbor was a Turk, my mother, and the lady was living next door. They were like sisters. They were always do the bread together in the same oven, and they were cooking together, no problem.
Working together so long time. Working together.
Yes, working together.
In mines, in agriculture, trade.
We used to have we used to pay the teacher the village. And the half of term, we had a Greek teacher, and the half of term we had a Turkish teacher. In our school, it was so mixed.
Haralambos and Kristalla Pafitis, now living in Hornsey, were farmers in the north of Cyprus.
Τον καιρό που ήμουν μωρόν εγώ με που είναι πάφο δηλαδή και κάτι κουστοδικό μου κάτω. Τα τουρκούκια πέφτουν μέσα στα εγκάλυμα, αλλά δεν ξέραν τούτσικα ούτε νερό να πουν οι τούτσι. Τι χορκούμενε. Επιένα στο σχολείο το δικό μας είμαστε τουρκούκια. Που ήμουν, είχαμε κοπάδι εμείς που ήμουν έτσι κοπελούι μικρόν και βοήθουν του βοσκού, πιέναμε τα χορκά, το δίκο μου με την Αγίρτα είναι κοντά. Και πουλάω τους τσίνους που μαθαλία τουρκικά, που τα κοπελούκια που εσμίαμε. Τους βοσκούς, ναι.
Cyprus is 43 miles from Turkey. For over 300 years it was occupied and ruled by the Ottoman Empire. In 1878, Britain leased Cyprus from Turkey to use as a military and trading outpost. When Turkey was defeated in the First World War, Cyprus was annexed to Britain, and Turkey surrendered all her claims in 1923.
On 1922, no, 24, isn't it? 1924, I went to the copper mine.
How old were you?
1924. I was 14 years of age when I went there. That was 21st of May, 1924, arrived in Skouriotis, how we call it. In that place, it was a mine with the all metal, gold, copper, everything. And I got a job there, and I used to get 7 pence a day. And I used to go in and out in the galleries, in and out.
The mines were owned by British, German, and American companies. The Sophocleous brothers were both arrested by the British police force.
We had a sort of committee, 7 Greeks and 6 Turkish with us.
What were you accused of, and by whom?
We accused them for the government and from the company, that we are disturbing the peace, and we take the laborers, you know, the workmen, to go on strike. And it wasn't allowed to strike those days because there was no union, was no nothing. We just come one morning and I said to them, he was the one who was speaking to the miners before we got in, and then I was supporting him, you know, and call all the miners there to hear all the conversation, all his speeches, and then all of a sudden the police come. Say, we want you for a minute. They took us into the police station, they put us into Black Maria, and took us to Cyprus, to the capital, and they locked us in.
This is the British police?
Yes, British, yes. It was the British, 1933. When we took us to Nicosia, all the laborers, the miners, they work for 35 miles, about 4,000 of them, they come to Nicosia supporting us.
Any protest by ordinary people against the British administration or foreign employers was suppressed. In 1931, a spontaneous uprising against British oppression and the burning of the governor's house led to a 10-year ban on any form of political activity. Stelios Iacovidis was a journalist in Cyprus.
The British colonialism, they have introduced a very unliberal situation in Cyprus. They were not permitting 5 persons to get together, no meetings and nothing at all, and all the previous liberties, the so-called council in Cyprus, which was elected, has been suspended. Just before the war, the situation was very, very serious about the unemployment, and there were demonstrations, although they were unlawful. The workers have been beaten up by the police, have been sent to prison because they were demonstrating for work, and so on. That it was my first experience as a young man in Cyprus.
The British permitted democratic municipal elections in 1943. One of the major parties had grown from the struggles of the 20s and 30s and had become a communist party called AKEL. Western governments would later perceive its popularity and success as a threat. Dr. Habibis is now a general practitioner in Bayswater.
But until that time, of course, it was the colonial regime, very, very benign. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Very benign, but still, it was authoritarian regime, and they just refused to see what the people wanted, you see, and we wanted our freedom. At that time, there were no differences between the Greeks and the Turks. There was harmony, and we, the Greeks, really were dominant in all fields in Cyprus. So one wasn't really thinking very much about the Turks, you see.
Cyprus is 500 miles from Greece. The church is Greek Orthodox, and 4/5 of the island are Greek-speaking. In 1949, a Greek Orthodox bishop was elected by the Greek Cypriots as their archbishop and national leader. His name was Makarios. In 1950, the church held a plebiscite in which 96% supported enosis, or union with Greece. But Britain had no intention of allowing either enosis or independence. By 1954, Cyprus was Britain's military headquarters for the Middle East. Brigadier Harbottle was second in command of a regiment in Cyprus in the early 50s.
When I went there in 1950, the head of my regiment went there. But that was the first time, I think, that, or very early on in the period, when there was a regiment and a small headquarters. The policy there really was, like in so many cases, an administration, a sort of caretaking. And from the British government's point of view, there was a very direct responsibility for Turkey, having acquired it from them in exchange for other guarantees. Around the early 1950s, in the House of Commons, in the debate, the Under-Secretary of State for Colonial Affairs, when questioned, said, to quote, "Many other colonial territories will, in due course of time, receive their independence, but Cyprus never will."
In 1954, the Greek government appeals to the United Nations for Cypriots to have the right to decide their own future. But Britain vetoes the motion and encourages Turkey to declare an interest in the future of Cyprus. A Cypriot-born Greek army officer, Colonel George Grievous, returns to Cyprus from Greece in 1954. During the Second World War, Grievous has led an extreme right-wing guerrilla group fighting the Greek communist resistance. With the secret support of Archbishop Makarios, he forms AOKA, the Greek Cypriot organization of freedom fighters, guerrilla fighters determined to overthrow British rule and unite Cyprus with Greece.
When he started the struggle, the armed struggle, he said that we want the left of Cyprus to stay away from the struggle. Irrespective of that, those who have taken part in AOKA, most of them, a great part of them, were believing that they were fighting for the liberation of Cyprus.
Panos Hedjipini is now a solicitor working in London.
The attitude of most young men at that time was were taken by emotion and sentimentality. Oh yes, it was the dawn has arrived in order for Cyprus to be united with Greece, a dream which was thousands and thousands of years entertained and nourished, especially by the church and the intellectuals, I must say.
On the 1st of April 1955, AOKA bombed the Cyprus broadcasting station in Nicosia. This is followed by other explosions throughout the island. Grievous and the AOKA fighters encourage civil disobedience against the British. Michael Athanasiou is now a minicab driver in Edmonton.
We wake up one morning and they were saying that the revolution started for the independence of Cyprus, for Enosis, not for really independence, for Enosis with Greece. And just it took us as a surprise. And when things, they start boiling up, and they were saying, for instance, the communist and the Turkish is not in our part. Stay away from this struggle because we are the people for this type of struggle. They were keeping us away. They were keeping the people away. When they were keeping the leftists and the Turks away, that meant they were keeping the majority of the people of Cyprus away. One night, I went home, and we went to bed, and it was about 1 o'clock in the early morning hours, midnight. We heard knocks on the door, and my mother went and opened the door. And it was the police with the army together. And they were asking whether I was home. So my mother said yes, and wake him up and warn him. I woke up and just walked to the door, and they said, "You are arrested." No reasons, no nothing. Didn't know nothing about it.
Well, I was one of the 135 members of Vagel who have been arrested on the early hours of the 14th of December 1955 and sent to concentration camps for about 2 years. I have been arrested for nothing. I have not been tried. There were laws at that time by which the governor of Cyprus could have arrested anybody and sent him to the concentration camps.
The Popular Communist Party is banned. Trades unionists and politically active Greek and Turkish Cypriots are arrested. In December 1955, a state of emergency is declared. Archbishop Makarios, the figurehead of the Enosis movement, is exiled. The AOKA fighters, led by Grievous, continue their guerrilla activities, increasing in numbers and gaining support from the Greek Cypriot community. Panayota Exida was a farmer in the village of Asha.
Ακριβώς 1η του Αυγούστου, 14 ημέρες, είμαστε κατοίκον περιορισμό. Όλη μέρα τα αυτοκίνητα διασταύρωναν το έναν το άλλο, οι στρατιώτες. Έρευνες μέσα στα σπίτια γενικά, όλους. Μας εφώναζαν κάθε πρωί να ξεβούμε μισή ώρα να πάρουμε νερό για να κάνουμε λίγο ψωμίσμα. Και σε έναν πραγματικά που ήταν της Σιώκας, έκανα φωλιάνε στο σπίτι του. Δεν τον άφηνα σχεδόν να κινηθεί η γυναίκα του να κάνει δουλειά. Είχε 3 φορούδες αυτός που τη μιάνε πήραμε και στα κρατητήρια τη Χρύσο. Τη μεγάλη του την κόρη ήταν μορφωμένη. Την πιάσαν και την πήραν και στα κρατητήρια. Όταν την έβαζα μέσα στο αυτοκίνητο, χτυπούσε το εγγλέζο μου του παπούτσι στο χέρι και έκλαινε η μητέρα της. Και φώναζαν τη μη φοβάσαι μάμα και να έρθω. Ήταν ξέβηνε η παθητική αντίσταση. Ό,τι έκαναν κι αυτοί τον καιρό εκείνο δεν υπολόγιζαν ότι ήταν να μας γίνει αυτό το κακό που μας έγινε, που τώρα μας επήραν όλους στο ρεύμα, ναι. Και αριστερούς και δεξιούς και όλες και όλοι μας τράβησαν το ρεύμα και μας επήραν και μας εκούμπησαν όλους στον νότο και κλαίμε και δακρύζουμε μέχρι τώρα χωρίς σωτηρία κανένα να δούμε.
In 1957, Cyprus is under martial law. Measures to stamp out the Greek Cypriot guerrillas are intensified by the British, who seek out, arrest, and hang several AOCA fighters. The British government, having previously said that Cyprus can never expect to be independent, now begins to talk about the country being divided between Greek and Turk. Reluctant to lose Cyprus, they will encourage a conflict on the island which will necessitate their continuing presence. A group of Turkish Cypriots, including a lawyer, Rauf Denktaş, begin to demand Taksim, partitioning the island. They are nationalists and anti-communists supported by the mainland Turkish government. Yashir Ismailoglu was a Turkish Cypriot schoolboy in 1957.
They were the members of the Turkish fighters organization, which we can, at that time they were called Volkan. If you want to translate it or to break the words, it's if you want to live, you must kill. And later that organization, it turned to be the TMT, the Turkish organization.
1/5 of the population is Muslim and Turkish-speaking. They are excluded from the AOCA struggle. This separation of the communities is encouraged by the British. If Cypriots can be divided, their struggle for independence will be weakened.
The English soldiers, they are rushing in the village with a lot of Bedford cars and Land Rovers and a lot of soldiers. And one time I remember there was also a tank that they round up all the Greek men, and they rounded up in the playground, and they encircled them with barbed wire, and then they went and they asked the Turkish menfolk of the village to be auxiliary police. They were paying them salaries to control the Greeks.
The British did manipulate to the point that they lent on the Turks in terms of seeking their assistance wherever it was profitable, based on the whole, as I say, the principle that their policy of divide and rule, which was not to allow the communities to form one identity, but to continue always to keep them apart.
Turkish Cypriots in the uniform of the British police force will become the victims of the Aoka struggle. Some are killed. On the 7th of June 1958, a bomb explodes in the Turkish Cypriot quarter of Nicosia. It is seen as an attack upon Turkish Cypriot by Greek Cypriot. In fact, the bomb has been planted by TMT to deliberately generate anti-Greek Cypriot feeling and encourage the separation of the two communities through violence. Panayota Exida remembers the troubles in her village.
Και καθόμαστε έξω. Ενώ κάθεται ο κόσμος και κοίταζε το σινεμά, ακούσαμε την καμπάνα της Αφάνκια να χτυπά δυνατά. Από την Άσαν επέξαν τους χριστιανούς οι Τούρκοι της Αφάνκιας ενώ καθόταν μέσα στο καφενείο. Και τότε ο κόσμος αναστατώθηκε εκεί. Σαν ήμασταν εκεί, ερχόνταν δυο πεζοί από την Αφάνκια να γυρίσαν πίσω. Δυο πεζοί, αυτή ήταν το κακό που φοβήθηκαν οι Τούρκοι χωριά νηματσοφία. Δεν τους εμπειράξαν κανένας άλλος. Και έλεγαν να πάμε και μην να τους κρούσουμε, να δούμε να τους αρέσει. Και τους εφώναξαν πολλοί άνθρωποι ηλικιωμένοι, είχε μια γειτόνισσα σαν τους, που είχε δυο-τρεις τουρκούδες γειτόνισσες και τους εφώναζε. Για το όνομα του Θεού ρε παιδιά, μην κάνετε έτσι πράγμα, είμαστε γειτόνιγε μου. Είναι αντροπή, είναι κρίμα, τι σας έκαναν τα πλάσματα σαν και μόντι. Αλλά αυτοί δεν ακούσαν, ναι. Και πήγαν τζάγυρα, ό,τι ήταν γύρα, δεν ξέρω, πετρέλαιο, μπεζίνα, ήμουν εκεί και εδώ καφωτιά και κρούσαν τους στο φραμόν τους. Οι άνθρωποι φοβήθηκαν, είναι. Όταν εξημέρωσε, ένας έφυγαν όλοι. Και από εκεί άρχισε το μίσος.
In one incident, soldiers release a group of arrested Greek Cypriot men outside the Turkish Cypriot village of Genyeli. They are murdered by armed Turkish Cypriots in the village. In July 1958, General Grievous orders attacks upon police stations with Turkish Cypriot policemen and lifts the restriction on killing Turks.
We had two schools. One, it was the Turkish school, and it was on the hillside. And down the hill, it was the Greek school. And between two schools, there was a playground. And that playground also was used for the harvest time. And during the breaks, both schools, Greek and the Turkish school, they were using the same playground. We used to play marbles, we used to play football, we used to play lingri. Lingri, it's some sort of a Cypriot cricket, with all together. And one day there was a football match. We went to classes of the Turkish school, and suddenly we've been raided by stones, and we didn't know what's happening, and we were so scared some of the boys was hurt. So the teacher said that the Greeks, they were organizing violence, and that was the Aoka, and that they were going to kill all Turks. And then we had also some Greek students coming behind the playground telling us that their teacher also was telling them that the Turks are enemies.
The TMT leadership encouraged frightened Turkish Cypriots to move into their own no-go areas or enclaves. The policy is to bring about the complete separation of their community and subsequent division of the country. They encourage fear and hatred and persecute those opposing their policies and those advocating solidarity between Greek and Turkish Cypriot. Mehmet Nurettin was an active trades unionist in 1958.
We believed that the intercommunal clashes and those who were creating the clashes, they were killing innocent people, they were not serving the true interests of Turkish and Greek Cypriots. And by leaflets and other means, we try to enlighten our community and even speak to the Greek Cypriots to stop this innocent bloodshed in Cyprus, etc. It was in this tense atmosphere that the Zurich and London agreements was imposed on Turkish and Greek Cypriots. I say imposed on us because neither the Turkish nor the Greek Cypriots were given a chance to express their views.
In 1959, the British government described to the Greek and Turkish governments the terms under which it will allow Cyprus's independence. Cypriots are not involved in the discussions. Exile leader Makarios is forced to sign under threat of the island being divided. General Grievous, having not achieved his aim of enosis, returns to Greece. On Independence Day, Sir Hugh Foote and the leaders of the two communities signed the Constitution of Independence. In it are enshrined the intercommunal differences which the British have created in order to ensure their continuing presence even after independence. Britain, Greece and Turkey, three NATO countries, will have the right to intervene if the constitution they have prepared is threatened. Britain will keep 99 square miles of sovereign territory for military use, and there will be 950 Greek and 650 Turkish soldiers permanently stationed in Cyprus.
Turkish and Greek Cypriots look to the future with optimism. The troubles were behind us. People started to work and build a new life. And believe me, we were looking to the future with a relieved and optimistic attitude. But again, you see, external forces had other plans for us. They started their intrigues and incitements again. And our newspaper, Cumhuriyet, published by two barristers, Ayhan Hikmet and Muzaffer Gürkan, were heroically fighting against this tendency to divide the people and start new troubles in Cyprus. One of them was shot and killed in front of the eyes of his wife. That was during the night. In one night, two of them were murdered.
The night before their death, Hikmet and Hurkan have been warned by the TMT leader, Rauf Denktash, to cease publication of their newspaper.
We had, during those years, quite a lot of killings of Turks, progressive Turks, by the chauvinist elements of the Turks, and especially personally by Denktash. We know that the two lawyers who have been killed in their homes in 1962, they have been killed by the circles of Denktash.
TMT, supported by the Turkish government, arm and train their youth in anticipation of their declared aim of partition of the island.
Everybody was called to be trained to defend themselves. I was at the last year at the college, and I was also called, and I remember the first day I moved to a room and there was a Turkish flag on a table. There was a brain gun, there was a Sten gun, a rifle and a pistol, and there was also a book, the Holy Quran, and there was about 5 faces which I knew them, and I was make an oath that what I see, what I hear, I will not tell to my mother, I will not tell to my girlfriend, and that I will fight to defend the Turkish community. It was a historical day for me, and until I die, I will remember that day, because I was trembling like a little bird. I was trembling like a jelly.
After 3 years of government in which the constitution has proved unworkable, President Makarios suggests amendments intended to overcome the deadlock. These are rejected by the Turkish government and the Turkish Cypriot leadership. Tension between the two communities explodes in Nicosia, precipitated by the shooting of a Turkish Cypriot. Intercommunal violence erupts. President Makarios and Vice President Küçük desperately try to calm the situation. A gang of paramilitary Greek Cypriots, led by a man called Nikos Samson, enter the village of Ormafita, defeat the TMT, and kill Turkish Cypriot men, women, and children. The Turkish Cypriots leave the government. Turkish troops join TMT to take command of villages in the north of Cyprus, creating a no-go area for Greek Cypriots. President Makarios goes to the United Nations, fearing a Turkish invasion. The British, insisting that they keep the peace, move into Nicosia to draw the green line. Barbed wire is placed between the two communities.
The Green Line was drawn at Christmas in 1964. In fact, General Peter Young, who was at that time commanding the British sovereign base in Episcopi, he took a green pencil, one of these map marking pencils, and he drew a line between the Turkish and the Greek Cypriot enclaves in Nicosia and said, this will be the line of disengagement.
Further violence and atrocities are committed by the extremists of both communities. TMT influenced the Turkish Cypriot community to move away from their homes and the threat of violence. By the end of 1964, 20,000 Turkish Cypriots have left their homes and moved into enclaves, where they established their own administration. This is blockaded by the Cypriot government and economically supported by Turkey. Kamil Ahmet, a Turkish Cypriot shoemaker.
One night we was at home, and we heard that somebody came there, and they said they start trouble in Tahtakala between Greeks and Turks, and they are fighting there. And some of Turkish people, they run to save the Turkish people. Some, I don't know the Greek side what's happened there. And the next day we went to work. I used to work in Bata shoes factory. Some of Turkish workers, they came to me and they said, let's go home. And some Greek people, they told us, you better go. And from that day, I remember we separated from there.
At peace talks in London, the Turkish government proposes that 1/3 of Cyprus be Turkish Cypriot. Turkey continues to import arms and men into Cyprus. Makarios, fearing a Turkish invasion, forms a Cypriot National Guard and introduces conscription for all men. He purchases arms from Egypt and the USSR. President Makarios requests a United Nations peacekeeping force, which arrives in March. General Grievous returns to Cyprus. He takes command of the Greek forces and the National Guard to lead an attack upon Turkish troops in the north. His intention is to destroy the beachhead they are establishing with Turkey. The Turkish Air Force bombs Cyprus, drops napalm, and kills civilians. Their fleet prepares to sail. the Soviet Union warns Turkey to stop, and the Russian fleet enters Cypriot waters. It becomes clear that the United States will take over Britain's role as guardian of Cyprus and protector of its strategic military position in the Mediterranean. United States President Johnson, fearing Soviet intervention, tells Turkey to cease hostilities. He directly threatens the security of the Greek government if they do not support American plans for Cyprus.
It was thought to be necessary to certain people in NATO because they felt that only if the island was securely divided under a NATO, the control of a NATO Greece and the control of a NATO Turkey, then that would rule out the possibility of Makarios being Castro in a black hat and a beard sort of thing, of a communist Cyprus. They wanted to keep the Russians out, and the military and the CIA thought the best way of keeping the Russians out was some sort of partition, some sort of double enesis.
Their worry, as far as I can understand, was the non-aligned policy pursued then. And even to this day, they do not like the non-aligned policy pursued by Cyprus. They wanted a Cyprus which would have towed their line completely. They wouldn't have questioned what they were doing in Cyprus or in the area. This is, I believe, this worried them. This worried them then, and it still worries them now.
There are large demonstrations in Cyprus against the British and American plan to divide the country.
We were saying all the time that if you want a solution of the Cyprus problem, the cooperation of Turkish and Greek Cypriots, the understanding between the two communities is necessary. And Kavazoğlu was a great fighter of this trend.
In 1965, two leading trades unionists, Turkish Cypriot Dervish Kavazoglu and Greek Cypriot Kostas Michalis, are together symbolically murdered. In Greece, the democratically elected government who oppose American plans for Cyprus are overthrown by a military junta, colonels directly supported by the CIA.
They hijacked government. They took the government by force. It was an act of armed robbery, really. They did not serve the interests of Greeks. They served what they thought was their interests and the interest of the Americans.
Greek officers and soldiers have entered Cyprus unofficially in increasing numbers, totaling over 10,000 men by 1967. The Turkish government continue to import arms and men into Cyprus. At the village of Kofanu, General Grievous and the Greek officers confront TMT.
The local Greek Cypriot policeman, police sergeant, who was, I think his name was Sam, I mean, he was well known to the villagers, used to bicycle into the Turkish quarter of Kofanu. But on this particular occasion, he was stopped by Turkish Cypriot fighters and forced to go back. And Grievous took it into his own hands, therefore, to resolve the problem. And he carried out one or two rather provocative sorties into the village until eventually the Turkish Cypriot fighters responded and opened fire. And that was the excuse that Grievous basically was looking for. And he then brought all his weapons, artillery, machine guns, infantry, and some armored cars into action against the village. The resultant action brought death to the Turkish Cypriot community, with the fighters, most of the fighters among the dead. repercussions from that went worldwide. The Turkish army actually got into their landing craft. Air Force, Turkish Air Force planes flew over. It became a major debate in the United Nations.
After Kofanu, the Turkish government demand the return of Grievous and the vast numbers of illegal Greek soldiers. In 1968, President Makarios officially abandons the idea of enosis. In the presidential election, 96% vote for his independent, non-aligned policies. In 1970, assassination attempts begin upon the life of Makarios. His helicopter is shot down, but he escapes this and many other attempts. The colonels in Greece send George Grievous back to Cyprus. He enters secretly and takes command of Ioka B, a group of armed right-wingers intent upon overthrowing Makarios and establishing enosis.
The way Grievous has landed in Cyprus, and we had information that the Americans had their hand in it. Then it was the second time when Grievous came to Cyprus for the formation of Ioka B against Archbishop Makarios and his policies. And it was very well known that it was with the help of the Americans that he had come there, because Archbishop Makarios was following at the time the non-aligned policy, which is not of the desired and likable to Americans.
Yanis Senikis was a Cypriot policeman.
Και ορισμένα που να σας αναφέρω τώρα, πας στους τοίχους ή στα σπίτια γραφούνταν έσχος στο Μούσκο, δηλαδή έσχος στο Μακάριο, έσχος στους προδότες, τους άτιμους, τους κομμουνιστές. Έγραφαν ακόμα σε μία αποθήκη των πατατών. Θυμούσαν τώρα, έγραφαν έσχος στους προδότες τους κομμουνιστές ή στην ώρα της τιμωρίας. Υπήρχαν κάποια ανεμένα μίσον έντονας της αστυνομικής δύναμης τις πολυπεριστές του Μακαρίου. Υπήρχε κάποιον μίσος ενάντια της αστυνομίας που την Ioka Β.
Ioka B intensify their attacks upon police stations and public buildings, assassinating their opponents. In 1971, Makarios visits Moscow and purchases arms from Czechoslovakia. Both the Greek and the Turkish governments object to his controlling an armed force. The key of the arsenal is given to the United Nations. Another coup in Greece brings to power a junta who send new officers to Cyprus with the deliberate intention of cooperating with the Ioka B and fulfilling the foreign policies of Nixon and Kissinger. In January 1974, George Grievous dies. The Greek officers in Cyprus execute a coup. Their intention is to overthrow the government and kill Archbishop Makarios. But Archbishop Makarios escapes from Cyprus and humiliates the junta at the United Nations by denouncing their interference in Cyprus. Five days after the coup, Turkish troops land on Cyprus. Their declared aim is to restore peace and the constitution, and to protect the Turkish Cypriots. The division of Cypriot people will be completed by Turkish troops who move south to create a border along the lines planned by the British and Americans years before, a border which has remained for over 10 years.
population of Cyprus left their homes and found themselves living as refugees in their own country. Many came to Britain like the prodromos.
I was fed up. I was so fed up. I said, look, I lose everything in Cyprus. I lose my house. I lose my job. I lose everything. So I came in this country now. Nobody knows me. Nobody knows. My children, they ask for food. I have no. I waited there. Was hungry. My children cried. They asked for food again. Yeah, they asked for something to drink. I was very fed up. I say, why the Turkish done this to us? Why? What's the reason they done this to us? I say. What they win about that? Why they done this? I say to us.
In London, Greek and Turkish Cypriots demonstrate against the division of their country and their communities. 1/6 of all Cypriots live in Britain. Many came here with British passports in the 1950s and 60s. Others came as refugees when their country was divided in 1974. Stavros Stylianou, a Cypriot living in Britain, one of many forced to leave his home in the north of the country.
If you go back to your own country, you expect to go back to the place that you have been born or grew up. Now, by going back to Cyprus and staying in a strange place, or in a strange village or town, you are counted as a refugee, a stranger, among, your own people. So being in this country again, you are a foreigner or refugee here, as we have lost, our places and towns and villages. I count myself as a refugee. I presume the others do as well, because they are unable to return to their own places.
Britain had governed Cyprus for over 80 years and had guaranteed to protect its independence in the Constitution, which Sir Hugh Foote, the last colonial governor, had signed in 1960.
See, when in the agreement we made, in the treaty we signed, I signed it. Great Britain, Greece, and Turkey undertook to ensure that the settlement we had made would be preserved. And when the Turks came in with their army, rising from the coup which came from the colonels in Greece, I'm ashamed to say that our government did not play its part. We still are one of the guaranteeing powers of the original settlement. We're not playing an effective role. We have a greater responsibility, I think, than anyone. We governed the place for 100 years. We ought to be able to make a useful, constructive contribution. I'm not satisfied that we've done so.
The division of Cyprus and the suffering of its people had been brought about by those intent upon securing their political and military interests in a strategically placed Mediterranean island. In 1967, the democratic government in Greece was overthrown by a military coup, supported by the United States. Greek officers were stationed in Cyprus and commanded the Cypriot National Guard. They revived the idea of enosis, or union with Greece. Andreas Georgiou, now living in London, was a Greek Cypriot soldier.
Όπως κάποιος, όταν εξαίρεις από στρατό, ορκίζεσαι να υπακούεις, να έχεις τυφλήν υπακούει προς τους ανωτέρους σου. Οι ανωτέροι μας ήταν Έλληνες εξωματικοί. Δυστυχώς, άλλες διαταγές διούσαν η Κυπριακή κυβέρνηση να κάνουν Έλληνες αξιωματικοί και άλλα έκαναν οι ίδιοι. Οι Έλληνες αξιωματικοί παίρναν σε διαταγές από την Ελλάδα. Η κυβέρνηση δυστυχώς, ήδη ο Μακάριος, ποτέ δεν διαμαρτυρήθηκε για αυτό το πράγμα. Απλώς άφηκε εμάς να φωνάζουμε Ελλάς Κύπρος Ένωσης. Ορισμένοι από τους στρατιώτες που δεν εφωνάζαν, ήταν είτε από πείσμα, είτε είχαν γυνάτην τέλος πάντων, δεν εφωνάζαν Ελλάς Κύπρος Ένωσης, ορισμένοι από αυτοί εγώ πιστεύω ότι τους σκοτώσασαν. Η δικαιολογία ήταν ότι ήταν σκοποί ή κάπου και εκπλησιοκρότησαν το όπλο. Η δικαιολογία ήταν επεκτήκαν μόνοι τους.
The military junta in Greece were intent upon overthrowing the Cypriot government. The popularity of President Makarios, his non-aligned policies, and his visits to communist countries were perceived as a threat to Western interests.
Στις 15 του Ιούλη 1974 σηκωστήκαμε όπως πάντα να πούμε το πρωί στο στρατό, μέσα στο στρατόπεδο, και είπαμε ότι να κάνουμε μια άσκηση συναγερμού. Και είδα που κρατούσαν και όπλα να πούμε, με σφαίρες μέσα, με ούλα, ήταν έτοιμοι για μάχη, όχι για άσκηση. Εγώ είπα το σε έναν που έξερα, είχα το εμπιστοσύνη, ότι σήμερα είναι μια πολύ δύσκολη μέρα για όλους μας. Την ημέρα της 15 του Ιούλη, οι στρατιώτες έπρεπε όποιον εθωρούσαν μέσα στον δρόμο με όπλο και είχε τη στολή του στρατιώτη να τον σκοτώνασει. Για να ζήσουν ήδη. Τούτον ήταν το πιο δύσκολο για τους στρατιώτες.
On the 15th of July 1974, the Greek officers in Cyprus executed a coup. President Makarios and the government had no defense other than from a small presidential guard, their supporters in the police force, and some armed civilians. In 5 days of fighting, more than 500 people were killed opposing the coup, and many were arrested. Yannis Senekis was a policeman.
Εφύγαινε αστυνομική δυνάμεις από την Ισότιμπου. Ανοίξαμε τώρα και ακούσαμε εμβατήρια. Να το ρε παιδιά, να τους είναι πραξικοί. Αν τους είναι η τελευταία μας μέρα σήμερα, της ζωής με λαό του. Εξέραν το στόμα μας. Ξέρουν το να κάνουμε. Ξέρεις, όταν μπήκαμε στο όριο, ακούσαμε πυροβολισμούς, θυμίζαν τώρα ότι ήρθαν και συλλάβα μας και είπαν μας είσαστε κουτσίνους, θες που τους τίντα από τη μακαριότητα του και τους τα όπλα μας.
The Greek junta's plan to kill Makarios failed. He escaped to London. Makarios went to the United Nations, where he represented 96% of all Greek Cypriots in his condemnation of the Greek colonels. The Greek colonels were unable to find a prominent politician who would act as their president. Instead, they used Nikos Samson, a notorious Greek nationalist remembered for atrocities against Turkish Cypriots 10 years previously. Attacks such as these had encouraged the frightened Turkish Cypriot community to move into their own enclosed areas. The community was dominated by a nationalist organization which had close links with Turkish military officers. Their aims were to divide Cyprus and partly unite it with Turkey. Tuma Garrett was a Turkish Cypriot schoolboy.
This was in July 74, just the beginning of July 74, either the first or the second, that advert came up in the papers that a youth recreation camp was organized by the Minister of Sports and Youth of the Turkish, by the Turkish government, the Turkish Cypriot government at the time. And I had just taken my O-levels and so on. So me and my friends, we thought, well, that's great. They're organizing this for 15 days, and it will be near the seaside. And it will be a lovely, holiday for us, summer holiday. So we packed and went there to, enjoy ourselves, go to the sea. But what it came out to be is that this camp turned out to be a camp where every single day we were going to the sea, but it was only for 2 hours. And the rest of the time, we were being given military exercises, we were being given lectures and seminars, and all the lectures and seminars were on Ottoman Empire, on Turkish nationalism, on the Cyprus and the link with Turkey. I would say all those children which came out of that camp, it was a group of people in 12 and 17. They would be really going out, and if the first Greek person that they would have seen out in the street, they would have killed straight away, because the atmosphere was so severely chauvinistic, so severely anti-Greek, and so on.
In Turkey, the government excited people to think of Taksim, annexing Cyprus to Turkey. Nuri Samyeli was working as a journalist.
Üniversitede bir süre çalıştım. Onun dışında serbest gazetecilik yaptım. O dönemde de tam işgal sırasında Ürün dergisinin kurucusuydum ve yazı işleri müdürüydüm. Türkiye'de o dönemde toplumsal çatışmalar yükselmekte, sınıf savaşı yükselmekte. Ve Türkiye egemen sınıfları gerçekten sosyal barışa ihtiyaç duyuyorlar. Ve Kıbrıs çıkartması bu şovenist ve milliyetçi dalgalanma altında tam da bu isteklere yanıt veriyor. Bunu da açık açık söylüyorlar. Örneğin o dönemki kontenjan senatörlerinden Hürriyet Gazetesi yazarlarından Ecvet Gülesin bunu açık açık söylüyor. Yani diyor artık savaş var. Bu milliyetçi birleşim altında bütün sınıfsal çıkarlar bir tarafa bırakılacak, grevler bir tarafa bırakılacak. Bu yüzden çok çok olumludur diyor.
Every single night from 10 p.m. at night till 6 a.m. in the morning, we had to keep watches along the seashore so that we would be able to see the Turkish Navy coming in. That was our task, and they said this was a heroic task that we had to do because Turkish Navy is going to come, there's no other way. It was a known fact that Turkey is going to come. I mean, everybody has accepted it like that at the moment, that Turkey is, whether you want it or not, is going to forcefully come into the island.
On the 20th of July, 1974, Turkish troops landed in Cyprus. Turkey had guaranteed to protect the independence of Cyprus, and they landed with the declared aim of restoring peace and the constitution. Marula Artemi was in the district of Kyrenia.
Το μόνο που είδαμε ήταν τα αεροπλάνα που κατεβάζαν αλεξιπτοιστές στη μια μίλια. Ότι μια μίλια από το χωριό μου δεν είναι πολύ μακριά. Βλέπαμε τους αλεξιπτοιστές που κατεβαίναν, ας πούμε, που το πρωί, το Σαββάτο το πρωί. Μετά μείναμε εκείνη την ημέρα, να θυμούμε. Πήγαμε σε ένα σπίτι που είχε έτσι υπόγειο. Περάσαμε τη νύχτα μας. Εξημέρωσε η Κυριακή, 21 Ιουλίου. Μείναμε πάλι ως το μεσημέρι. Έπεσε και μια πόμπα, θυμούμε, σε κάποιο σπίτι. Ήταν πρωί, να θυμούμε, η ώρα 5:30 περίπου, που βλέπαμε τα αεροπλάνα φυσικά. Το ραδιόφωνο μας εκάλεσε γενική επιστράτευση. Ο αδερφός μου πήγε με τον γαμπρό μου, ας πούμε, να καταταγούν φυσικά.
There was a general mobilization of all active Greek Cypriot men.
Μπήκα μέσα σε φορτηγά αυτοκίνητα και πηγαίναν προς το Πελαπάισι. Την ώρα που περνούσα με τα φορτηγά, εμένα το σπίτι μου ήταν στο δρόμο που είναι το Πελαπάισι. Περάσαν απ' έξω από το σπίτι μου. Θυμόμαι πολύ καλά ότι τους είδαμε μέσα στο φορτηγό και μας κουνούσαν τα χέρια, ας πούμε. Ήταν η τελευταία φορά που τους είδαμε.
The junta in Greece and Samson's puppet regime in Cyprus resigned after the Turkish landing. Turkish troops occupied an area in the north. They invaded in a way designed to terrify the population and force them to flee. In the unoccupied south of Cyprus, Greek officers and their supporters moved against innocent Turkish Cypriot civilians. Many were detained. Some atrocities were reported. Later, some mass graves were uncovered. Turkish planes bombed Nicosia. Stavros Stylianou was a nurse at the mental hospital.
There was no warning, we had no preparations or anything. We didn't expect, and we never thought that the hospitals would have been bombed by any country, not only the Turks. But unfortunately it did happen. The first air attack took place at 3 minutes past 8, and then it continued in intervals of 15 to 20 minutes. So ourselves, colleagues and patients, we found a shelter across the mental hospital that was placed with orange groves. So we hid it in there until 6:30. It was terrifying. By 6:30, we have decided, all of us, to return back and see what was going on, and also to treat or to give some food to the patients, those who were still, because some they left, they did left the ground, but some they were just wandering about the hospital ground because they didn't know what was going on. Some wards they didn't have roofs. But being summer, at least they had a place to sleep.
The British, Greek and Turkish foreign ministers met in Geneva with the Cypriot leaders. The British Foreign Secretary said he was powerless to intervene. Before a solution could be found, Turkish troops moved south to create a border across Cyprus partitioning nearly 40% of the country, in a way first suggested by the British and American governments. Civilians were killed, prisoners were executed. There was looting, torture, and rape. Kristalla and Haralambos Pafitis were farmers in Dikamo, a village occupied by the Turkish army.
Με την εισβολή είπαν μας ότι να έρθουν οι Τούρκοι. Το λοιπόν, εγώ ήμουν άρρωστο τσέπεφτα. Δεν μπορούσα να πιω με τον άλλον κόσμο που έφυγε που το χορκόν.
Δεν ξέραμε πως έφυγε, δεν ξέραμε.
Ήμουν άρρωστος, δεν είδα κανέναν που κενώθηκε το χορκό να πούμε. Την επομένη ημέρα ήρθαν πολλοί Τούρκοι και βγάλαν μας έξω να μας πάρουν στο Πογάτζι. Εγώ δεν δέχτηκα και χτυπήσαν μου με το υποκόπανο του όπλου. Θα του λαλώ τους, εγώ δεν έκανα χτέσιμο, δεν έχω κανέναν κακό, γιατί με χτυπάτε, είσαι χριστιανός δηλαδή. Είχαμε πουλιά, όρνηθες δηλαδή, και σφάζαμε κάθε μέρα με έναν πουλί και χογλούσαμε και τρώαμε, και που ήρθε ένας Τούρκος που πρωί της Τουρκίας στρατιώτης και είδαν τα πουλιά μες στην παράγκα, δηλαδή να μου σφάξεις 3 πουλιά και να μου τα χογλάσεις. Εσφάξαμε, τα εχόγλασεν τούτα και πιάνε τα και πήγαινε. Το μεσομέρι αντί σε ένας Τούρκος ήρθαν 2 στρατιώτες. Δηλαδή όλα τα πουλιά να μου ασφάξεις. Εσφάξαμε τα, εδώκαμε τους τα όλα και πιάσει. Τα γουρούνια είναι του δικά μας, ήταν άλλου να πούμε και οι Τούρκοι επειδή έντρωσαν το σύρο, φύγαν τα νηστικά, τα ταΐζασαν και γριλίζαν και πούνιζαν το χορκονούλο. Και μας είδαμε, χωρούσαμε να μας παίξουν. Και νύχτωσεν ο Θεός η ώρα 8, αποφασίσαμε και φύγαμε. Τα σπίτια μας είναι Ανατολή και Δύση και φύγαμε που είναι πισινή πορτούαν και βγήκαμε μέσα στα χωράφια. Και πιάσαμε που τζαμέ πάνω κατά κοφτά που μέσα στα χωράφια πήγαν πάνω στα όρη. Αλλά περάσαμε που 3 φυλάκια δικά τους και μας είδαν οι Τούρκοι. Βγήκαμε πάνω στα όρη. Μείναμε και μέσα άλλο 3 ημέρες, αλλά τέτοια δίψαν δεν μπορώ να σου εξιστορήσω. Πεθάναμε του νερού. Ήρθε ένα κοπελούι και έπιαμε έτσι που είναι κουτάλαν και δηλαδή μου έλατε δάλατη και ο Θεός εγκλήτωσε σας. Δεν είμαστε Τούρκοι με εμείς. Είμαστε και εμείς χριστιανοί.
Nearly a third of the population of Cyprus, 200,000 people, fled from their homes to escape the advancing Turkish troops. 6,000 innocent Cypriots lost their lives. Greek Cypriot civilians were held prisoner in hotels, churches and football stadiums. Chris Zissimos, a local councillor in London.
In a panic, people who for thousands of years, peasant people, who fought and stayed on their land, suddenly in a panic ran for their lives because the villages were razed to the ground. No woman escaped the attention of the invading troops. No woman. They're terrified. An invasion and occupation has taken place, and it expelled 40% of its inhabitants out of their homes. It grabbed, it razed to the ground any resistance, and it grabbed the houses and the properties of 40% of the people, and it sent them into refugees.
The problem of the refugees is more important and must be solved more quickly than any of the other problems which face Cyprus.
Christopher Price visited the refugee camps in 1975 when he was an MP.
It was then that I got a feeling of the really harrowing nature of the refugee situation and the feeling that the refugees were not so much not just angry with the Turkish army, but their anger was was concentrated on what they knew instinctively was an outside force which had interfered in the Cyprus situation, but they didn't really know what it was.
Brigadier Harbottle commanded United Nations troops in Cyprus.
There is the story and the degree of substantiation is now minimal. That in fact the CIA and CIA money was used by the Greek colonels to overthrow Makarios. So if that is becomes a proven fact, it is clearly an indication that the Americans, some reason, was interested in upsetting the stability of Cyprus through that action.
Stelios Iacovidis was a journalist in 1974.
The Americans were behind the coup because they don't wanted Cyprus to be a non-aligned country, and Makarios was very, very in favor of Cyprus being a non-aligned country, having relations with all countries for the interest of Cyprus.
The democratic choice of Cypriots did not include membership of NATO, nor allow a United States military presence on the island. The invasion and occupation of over a third of Cyprus by Turkey would ensure the presence of NATO on the island. President Makarios was an obstacle to this plan.
The one thing Archbishop Makarios succeeded in including in the 1960 agreement was, because he could see this coming a mile off, he was a very wise politician, was that if Britain ever got out of the bases, they couldn't hand them over to anyone else. They had to hand them over back to the Republic of Cyprus. Now, we would have liked to have just given them to the Americans, who were taking over responsibility for the Middle East from us. But that couldn't be done. So when the Labour government, the 66, 70 Labour government, wanted to get out of the British bases in Cyprus, the Americans said, no, you can't. You just stay there, because we want a military base there. We might need it.
Irene Christoforou came from the village of Kithrea.
Πήγαμε στις βάσεις, κόσμος πάρα πολύ έκλαιγε. Οι Άγγλοι στρατιώτες άρχιζαν να αλέσει, να απομακρυνθεί ο κόσμος. Ήταν τόσο πολύς ο κόσμος, ότι πού θα τους έβαζα. Άρχισαν να λένε να απομακρυνθείτε, γιατί δεν ξέρουμε κι εμείς τι θα γίνει και δεν ευθυνόμαστε για το τι θα γίνει εδώ.
You must remember, we were preparing for a general election in Britain at the time, and people's mind was on other things. And as happens with members of Parliament, if the Turks had invaded in the winter, it would have been quite different, because there had been no British citizens there. But the place was lousy with British holidaymakers, and members of Parliament were deluged at their Saturday morning surgeries with families coming and saying, my children, my daughter, my father, my mother are in Cyprus, holidaying in Famagusta or Kyrenia. Get your government to do something about it. So the basis of the political pressure on the government at the time was to send a fleet in, yeah, but to pick up Brits and leave Cypriots behind.
A transference of populations was to take place. Cyprus was to be divided into a Greek Cypriot area and a Turkish Cypriot area. The Turkish government demanded that the Turkish Cypriot civilians in the unoccupied south be sent to the north. In September, Greek Cypriots who had been held prisoner in Turkey were exchanged for Turkish Cypriot civilians. United Nations troops administered the exchange of prisoners at the Ledra Palace Hotel in Nicosia. Thousands anxiously awaited the return of their relatives. They showed photographs to those returning, hoping for an indication of their fate.
Ο αδερφός μου πήγαινε στο φώτο Άντι πριν τον πόλεμο. 2-3 εβδομάδες να γίνει ο πόλεμος, έβγαλε φωτογραφίες στο φώτο Άντι. Εμείς φύγαμε από το χωριό μας, δεν πήραμε τίποτα, ούτε τσάντα, ούτε ταυτότητες, τίποτα για θύμιο από το σπίτι μας. Ξέραμε όμως ότι έναν περίπου που πήγαινε έβγαλε τη φωτογραφία ο αδερφός μου. Πήγαμε στο φώτο Άντι, μας έδειξε τις πλάκες, αναγνωρίσαμε τον αδερφό μου και μας έβγαλε φωτογραφίες. Τις φωτογραφίες αυτές τις δημοσιεύσαμε στην εφημερίδα και άλλες τις κρατούσαμε μαζί μας όταν πηγαίναμε στο Λίδρα Πάλας που γίνεται η ανταλλαγή αιχμαλώτων για την ανέπρεση του αδερφού μου.
More than 2,000 people did not return from the invaded sector. Today there are still over 1,600 missing persons. Their life or death has never been established. Marula Artemi's father, brother and brother-in-law were among the missing.
Από εκείνη την ώρα δεν ξέρει κανένας τι τους συνέβηκε βέβαια, αλλά πρέπει να υπάρχουν αγνώμενοι. Διότι μετά που γίνηκαμε πρόσφυγες, η Τουρκία έδινε μέσα στις εφημερίδες καταλόγους αιχμαλώτων. Εμείς καθημερινώς κοιτάζαμε με μεγάλη αγωνία να δούμε τα ονόματα τους δικούς μας, αλλά δυστυχώς δεν τα είδαμε τα ονόματα τους δικούς μας μέσα στους καταλόγους που δώσα. Και εκεί υπάρχει ένας μεγάλος κόμπος που πιστεύουν ότι υπάρχουν αγνώμενοι μέχρι σήμερα. Μπορεί να μην υπάρχουν όλοι αγνώμενοι, αλλά ορισμένοι πρέπει να είναι στη ζωή.
Some have been seen in prisons by the Red Cross. Voices have been heard on a pirate radio station. Photographs have been seen in newspapers and captured from war photographers. The Turkish government deny the existence of any missing persons and will not cooperate with Red Cross or United Nations inquiries. Many Turkish Cypriots in the unoccupied area of Cyprus fled to the safety of the British bases. They feared reprisals from the Greek Cypriots. In January 1975, the British government conceded to Turkish demands and airlifted the Turkish Cypriots to the north, thus actively taking part in the division of the Cypriot population. The Prodromou family were living in a refugee camp. They had relatives in Britain.
I said to my wife, we must leave the Cyprus, we must go somewhere to live, survive. Here we can't survive, here we can't live forever in under the trees. We must do something. So I borrowed some money for somewhere. And my wife, she telephoned to her, what do you call the cousin here in England, and she sent us one letter to say, okay, come to England, stay with us a couple of days. So I came by boat and left there by coach. 3 days in the coach, it was hungry because everybody food finish. So I came to Dover, and I have one letter with me, which they sent me from England to Cyprus, and I showed to the passport office. How many people you are? I say, we are 5. Why you came to England? I say, I'm a refugee. I have no anywhere to stay, and I came to England. And this is the letter, the place where I stay. My children, my daughter, I remember she was feel cold, do like that. She was hungry too. I said, oh my God. I was very fed up, very upset.
"10,000 Cypriot refugees came to Britain to join relatives. Some were allowed to stay as displaced persons. More than 7,000 left after facing problems with housing, employment, and difficulties in renewing their visas.
We live there about 5 people in one room. Me, my wife, my daughter, we sleep in the bed. My son, he was sleeping in the one like this, small one. He's tall, and his head was here, and his leg here. He says to me, "Oh my God, I can't sleep all night," he says to me. "I can't sleep there." I says, "Don't worry, we do something, don't worry." Later, I send my passport for visa again. It's finished. They sent me a letter from home office. I must leave the country. After these troubles I had, they sent me a letter. I must leave the country again. I make one letter. I say I must stay because I'm a refugee. I have nowhere to go, and I must stay.
Salih Kamil is a Turkish Cypriot refugee. He lives under the threat of a deportation order.
After the war, they forced me to move to north. And after I came here, 1976 I came here. And after 2 months I make application to Home Office. I am a refugee. I want to stay here. And they refused me to stay here. They told me all the time, go back to your country. You got a place there to live. Every time I told them I haven't got home, I've got a job, I haven't got anything. Because I lost my home, my village, everything, where I was born. And still 8 years, I'm here.
The British government unofficially recognized the division of Cyprus. They claimed that Greek Cypriots should return to the south of Cyprus and that Turkish Cypriots should return to the north, irrespective of where their homes might have been. According to the Geneva Convention, Cypriots were not refugees, as only a part of their country was occupied and they could return without fear of religious or political persecution. But Cypriots are unable to return to their homes. Their communities have been divided.
You allow a refugee to come in, and you say, okay, you can stay for 3 months or for 6 months, but you are not allowed to work. How can you live if you don't work? We have a mother earlier on today, 3 children, she has no other income, she's not allowed to work because she hasn't got a British passport, she can't go and claim supplementary benefit. How can they? How can they? So they go and work illegally and they're terrified.
It was only in 1982 that an amnesty was given to some of the refugees, allowing them to stay until a peaceful solution is found in Cyprus. Only those Cypriots entering Britain immediately after the loss of their homes were allowed to stay. Those who had entered in a panic and obtained visitors or student visas were excluded. Many of those still unable to return to their homes now find themselves living illegally in Britain, like this Greek Cypriot woman.
Because they haven't got a place to live. I'm a stranger there. I came here, I was 16, and I started my life here. It's not easy to go there and start my life again. And I asked for the visa, and they didn't give it to me. They gave me visa up to 1978. I received a letter from them, and they told me you must leave the country, or if you don't leave the country, you have to pay £200, and you have to stay in jail 6 months. I'm living in this country, but I'm hiding.
Why are you hiding?
Because they didn't give me permission to stay here. And I have to hide, and I have to work to live. And when they give my place back, I go back. But now I don't go. I'm going to hide always. Hide. Survive.
After Turkish troops had invaded Cyprus, only 20,000 Greek Cypriots remained living in the occupied area. 1 year later, only a half of them remained, in conditions of great hardship. The Turkish troops attempted to systematically expel Greek Cypriots from the north. Andreas Markou decided to remain in his village in the Karpas Peninsula.
Διότι η ζωή του είναι υπόφορη. Δεν μπορούν να ζήσω όλων απειλές. Συνεχώς απειλές. Πολλές φορές με πιάσαν νύχτα, μεσάνυχτα και με απειλούσαν διάφορα πράγματα για να φύγω. Και δεν αντέχα τη ζωή. Δεν αντέχα πιο. Δεν αποφάσισα να φύγω από το χωριό μου διότι γεννήθηκα, γίνηκα άνθρωπο να πούμε, έζουν όπως έθελα. Δεν αποφάσιζε κανέναν να φύγει το χωριό του που γεννήθηκε. Αν ήθελα να φύγω, έφευγα από μικρό να πούμε. Αλλά ήταν τόσο άσχημη ζωή που δεν μπορώ να ζήσω. Απειλές, βιασμοί, σκοτωμοί.
There are few Turkish Cypriots in the south and few Greek Cypriots in the north of Cyprus. There are about 1,000 Greek Cypriots still remaining in the northern Karpas Peninsula. Andreas and Angela Gabriel were finally allowed to visit their parents 6 years after the invasion.
We found a lot of houses empty, new people by Turkey. They come over in our village, and it's different.
They made that land. They've planted their trees, their crops. I mean, if they come over to the south of Cyprus, how they're going to survive, that's how they say, especially the oldest. They have no trees, they have no crops, they have no land.
Greek Orthodox churches in the north of Cyprus have been desecrated and ransacked. Historical relics have gone to Turkey and been sold internationally on the black market. Centuries of cultural heritage have been destroyed.
Well, it is emotional. If you can see your village or town for 100 yards, and you can see actually your own house, and you are not allowed to go and visit, or go and see, or go and live in your own house. It is very emotionally disturbed. It's not only that, it's the memories.
It is impossible for Greek Cypriots to return to their homes in the occupied area, and many of their homes are inhabited by Turkish Cypriots and Turkish settlers.
Και πήγαν τουρίστες από τη Σουηδία και βγάλαν τα Ηνωμένα Έθνη αποφασίσαν, βγάλαν σαν άδεια να πάει στο Βαρόθι και την παρακάλεσα αν μπορεί να πάει και στο σπίτι μας.
Δεν μπορεί να συνεχίσει, δεν μπορεί. Δεν μου είπα εγώ ότι μιλήσω καλύτερα. Basically, I want to speak better because I know she can. So this is my house in Famagusta. Who are working about 10.5 years to build this house. Me and my wife. 11 years work to do this house. And then for a couple of minutes after the invasion we lose it there. It's gone. Just like that.
On the 15th of November 1983, the Turkish Cypriot authorities declared the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. Rauf Denktaş became president. He was remembered as a leader of the TMT organization, who persecuted those advocating unity between Greek and Turkish Cypriot. The United Nations Security Council condemned the declaration of the independent state as legally invalid. No country recognizes the new state other than Turkey.
Now we have a situation where the United States, along with all the other states, refuses to recognize the Turkish Cypriot independence in northern Cyprus. And yet they are building a military airfield with the agreement of the Turks in North Cyprus. And when that airfield and air station is built, which is presumably part of the NATO east flank protection, from which strikes can be made into Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, that we have a situation where America does not recognize the administration in the north, and yet it will have troops and aircraft and everything else in an airfield they built there. So it's an incredibly ambivalent situation, I think, so far as the Americans can. I find it very difficult to actually assess and understand.
The United States deny any involvement in the new airport.
It is an American military. I mean, neither the Turks nor the Turkish Cypriots can afford that sort of billions of pounds to put that airport at Lefkonica. Of course, it's an American base. So Cyprus is going to have more airports per square mile soon than any other country in the world, but certainly it will be an American base.
The new airport at Lefkonica is costing more than $500 million, which is more than the total budget of the self-proclaimed state. Turkey, a member of NATO, receives $1 billion in military aid from the United States, who are keen to find a secure base for their military activities in the Middle East. The economically dependent and sympathetic Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus would be a perfect host.
So they need Cyprus as a military base. And let me say this. This is a book, a history of Cyprus, which I consider the best. It says, the very first line, it says, "He who would become and remain a great power in the East must hold Cyprus in his hands." And this was written in 1878. In 1878.
Cyprus has been divided. Populations have been transferred from one end of the country to another. There has been a coup by Greek army officers supported by the CIA. There has been an invasion by a Turkish army armed with American military aid. A democratic, united country has been destroyed. A country which chose not to align itself with any foreign power.
No, it's not a natural thing. It's been created by politics and by international rivalry. Therefore, I'm not absolutely hopeless that there can be an answer, a peaceful answer.
Cypriots, both Greek and Turkish, hope and wait for foreign armies to leave their country and for their communities to be reunited.
Αδελφέ μου Αντρέα, Αντρέα αδελφέ μου, ψωμί δεν είναι η πατρίδα στα δυο να μοιραστεί. Ο τόπος μας είναι, δεν μπορεί να χωριστεί. Πως είναι δυνατό τη γης να μοιραστούμε Αφού να ζήσουμε μπορούμε μαζί σαν αδελφοί.
Bölünür mü hiç? Andrea, kardeşim, ekmek değil ki bölelim, vatandır. Bölünür mü hiç? Olur mu vatanı bölmek? Dostça beraber yaşamak varken.
Andrea, my brother, our country is not a piece of bread that can be cut in two. Our birthplace cannot be divided. How is it possible to divide the land when we can live together like brothers?